what are the pros and cons of living in St. Catharines you need to know about before moving here and calling it home? Well, in today's video, I'm going to be sharing with you the 21 things you need to know about living in St. Catharines to ensure it is the right city for you and your family. And this is everything from the real estate to the shopping, to the schools, the parks, the entertainment, and more, as well as some huge cons that are absolute deal breakers for some of my clients and that choose not to move to St. Catharines, or in particular certain parts of St. Catharines. So you're going to learn all of that and more in today's video. We're going to be breaking it down, but before we get into that, let's first discuss the first pro associated with living in St. Catharines, and that is its amazing location in the Niagara region. As not only are you right on Lake Ontario, but you are actually the largest city in the Niagara region, as the population back in 2021 was sitting at 152,000 people, making it the 8th largest city in all of Ontario. And this large city not only has great employment options and a great amenities within it, but you're just a short 15-minute drive away from Niagara Falls, 35 minutes from Buffalo, New York, about 50 minutes to an hour to Hamilton, and then about an hour and a half, 2 hours to Toronto. And while this location offers some amazing pros, from the parks to the farms and everything in between we'll be talking about in just a moment, it definitely has some cons. So in a moment, we'll be jumping on the map, breaking everything you need to know down about living in St. Catharines, where those deal breakers are for some of my clients that want to avoid certain areas. So if you want to learn all of that, keep watching. But let's first talk about the next pro of living in St. Catharines, and that is the amazing shopping that this large city provides you, as you're going to find first and foremost the Penn Center, which is the largest shopping mall, not just only in St. Catharines, but the Niagara region, and it's located just on the south end of St. Catharines, with more than 180 stores to choose from Sports Check to Mark's Work Warehouse to HomeSense to Landmark Cinemas, Zehrs, Walmart, as well as a variety of other stores like H&M, Foot Locker, and a bunch of casual dining. Now, this shopping region here, because it is the largest, is going to have the most amount of people coming from the Niagara region to shop at this location here. But then another great shopping option that you'll enjoy when living in St. Catharines is the Fairview Mall. Now, this is a large plaza that has everything you need right smack dab in the middle of St. Catharines, from a Costco business center to a Home Depot's, a Winners, a Staples, another Sports Check, a PetSmart, and a variety of other stores. Then another main plaza you're going to be visiting when living in St. Catharines is the St. Catharines Smart Center, especially if you're living on the west side, as this is where you're going to find the Walmart, the Best Buy, a Canadian Tire, and a variety of other shops. Then one other notable shopping plaza I'll have to mention, while technically not in St. Catharines, but it's literally just outside of it, is the Outlet Collection at Niagara, with over 100 different outlet stores to shop at and find some amazing deals just on the outside of the east of St. Catharines, from a huge Bass Pro Shop to a Nike factory outlet, Ralph Lauren, Coach, Calvin Klein, and so many more name brand stores that you need to try. Especially one of my favorite snacks is here. It's a beaver tail. If you've never had it, would highly recommend. We used to get it all the time growing up. I recommend the cinnamon sugar one. Absolutely to die for. So definitely go grab that. Now, if you're new here and want to learn everything about what it's like living in St. Catharines, but the other areas around it, from Hamilton to Burlington to more out east, make sure to hit the subscribe button. My name is Matthew, the founding realtor of the Living in Hamilton channel and team, and for the past couple of years, been helping people just like yourselves relocate here and find the right spot. So if you're thinking about making the move, whether it's 60 days out or 6 months out, send me and my team a message today. But make sure to keep on watching to learn all the deal breakers you need to know about before moving to St. Catharines. But first, another pro about living in St. Catharines is the amazing parks and conservation areas the Niagara region has to offer you around St. Catharines, as you're first going to find Lakeside Park, which of course is right beside Lake Ontario, which has a great marina if you want to store a boat, a playground, as well as a beach. You also have Sunset Beach, another great beach, as well as has some of the best walking paths. Now, there are also some cons close to this park here that you'll want to know about. However, another great park you'll need to check out is Ducey Falls, which has got 3 different waterfalls to hike around and explore. You have the Ducey Falls, which is the largest falls at 72 feet high and drops into this beautiful turquoise pool. However, it's a bit hard to get to the bottom, so make sure you bring your hiking boots. But then you'll also find 2 other falls in the Tunnel Falls, which is a man-made waterfall that comes from a nearby hydroelectric plant, or also the Lower Falls, which is just a little bit more downstream. Then another great park is the Bernine Woods Park that has great walking trails, a dog park, as well as lots of different pickleball courts and a fantastic playground. And then right in the heart of St. Catharines, you're going to find Montebello Park. This here is the main park that's going to host a variety of different events and festivals that happen within St. Catharines. So if you want to learn the most notable festivals you'll need to attend when living here, keep on watching. But then another great park you'll need to go take a look at is the JC's Garden Park that has more great walking paths, especially if you enjoy running in nature or just enjoy lots of green space, perfect for a picnic. Then if your kids are in sports, you're going to be spending lots of time at the Lester B. Pearson Park that has a jungle gym, a splash pad, as well as a couple of different soccer fields, as well as the St. Catharines Aquatic Center that offers an indoor pool and public library. Then another pro about living in St. Catharines is the great community centers the city offers, as the main notable one is the Canada Games Park, which was built back in 2022 for the Canadian Summer Games and is a huge facility offering indoor ice rinks, gymnasiums, an indoor and outdoor track, beach volleyball courts, and more. But then you're also going to find a huge arena at the Seymour Hannah Sports and Entertainment Center with 4 NHL-sized rink, as well as a few other ice rinks around. Now, one of the things that my clients absolutely love about living in St. Catharines, especially your families other than the parks, is the amazing schools. So if you want to learn what the schools are like in St. Catharines, keep on watching. However, let's talk about a few other things you'll need to visit, especially if you're a family living in St. Catharines, and that is all the amazing family fun. From the Happy Ralph's Animal Farm, which has designated viewing areas where guests can observe adorable animals from a distance, walk alongside Lake Ontario, and have a picnic for a fantastic summer afternoon. Then you also have the First Ontario Performing Arts Center that has a variety of different shows, so make sure to take a look at the website to see what is performing soon. Then another great family fun is the Meridian Center, which is home to not only the Niagara River Lions, the local basketball team, but also the Niagara Ice Dogs, the local OHL hockey team. And this area here also, again, hosts a variety of events and other shows. And then if you have little kids, this is one that I used to really enjoy growing up, was the Aerosports Trampoline Park in Playtopia that has a lot of different trampolines, where they even host like trampoline dodgeball, but they have foam pits, obstacle courses, and just an absolute great time for your kids to enjoy. Then if you want to learn a little bit of history, you'll need to go take a look at the St. Catharines Museum and the Wellands Canal Center to learn about all the local history that this region has to offer you. Now, we've talked a lot about a lot of family fun that you can enjoy when living in St. Catharines. One of the pros or cons, depending on how you look at it, is the entertainment in St. Catharines. As here, you're not going to find a huge club scene. Again, most of my clients really don't mind that because their families, they want a spot that you can go to a bar, grab a couple of drinks, and catch up with old friends. And you're going to find lots of great options in St. Catharines for that. If you want to learn some of my local gems, keep on watching. However, with that said, some of my favorite local gems that you can go see for a bar or nightclub is the L3 Nightclub, the Mansion House, Romby's Tavern and Smokehouse, or also Parkway Social is another great spot to grab a drink and go bowling or laser tag. Now, one of the other areas, if you're really interested in more nightlife, is like I mentioned, you're like a 15-20 minute drive into downtown Niagara Falls in all the amazing events, festivals, shows that happen there that you can capitalize on. Plus, you're also located in the Niagara region, which is known for its local wines that we'll touch on in just a moment. So if you're a wine lover, lots of vineyards to go take a look at. Then another pro about living in St. Catharines is all the amazing local gems. So by no means do I have an exhaustive list for St. Catharines, but I do have a couple of shoutouts you'll need to check out. First and foremost is Fat Rabbit, which is a Michelin level sandwiches you need to try. My personal favorite is their roast beef sandwich, but then you also have Bugsy, which is a great sports bar that offers some amazing wings. You have Beechwood Donuts, which are the first ever that I know 100% vegan donut shop. And for someone that doesn't eat too much vegan, I can't tell you the difference between these and other donuts. Would highly recommend. But then you'll also have Seoul Cuisine for the best Korean food around, Sunrise Cafe to enjoy an amazing breakfast in St. Catharines. Plus, you'll need to pick up their butter tarts for a nice sweet treat to start the day. To Big Tuna for some amazing all-you-can-eat sushi. And then one of the other things I know I personally love to go and do is check out the local farmers market. And St. Catharines has a busy farmers market you'll need to take a look at. And it's been going on since 1860 every single Saturday morning in downtown St. Catharines, right in the market square. So it's indoors, offering you farm fresh produce, meats, baked goods, fresh cut flowers, and lots of local vendors. Then one of the events that's going to happen on an annual basis and not weekly basis that you'll need to take a look at is the amazing local events and festivals that happen in St. Catharines, like the Niagara Grape and Wine Festival, which is the oldest and largest wine festival and has been running for over 73 years. And it includes 100 different events, from wine tasting to live music to line dancing and a variety of other events and festivals within this larger festival here. And it runs at the end of every September, celebrating the harvest season. Now, if you want to learn where the best wineries and vineyards are, I'd recommend you go take a look at. Keep on watching. But then another great event that happens in St. Catharines is the St. Catharines Rib Fest that offers a variety of ribs, pulled pork, barbecue chicken, live entertainment, fresh corn on the cob, and amazing lemonade. And this is held at the beginning of August in Montebello Park. Then you'll also find the Niagara Folk Arts Festival, which is Canada's oldest continually running heritage festival, celebrating its 57th annual one. And this takes place in May and really celebrates the cultural heritage between a bunch of live music and shows and fantastic food. Now, we've talked a lot about the pros of living in St. Catharines. However, one of the cons of living in St. Catharines you need to be aware of is the homelessness and petty crime that occasionally happens in downtown St. Catharines. Now, this doesn't cover the entirety of St. Catharines, as St. Catharines is very safe, which we'll talk on in just a moment. However, like any large city in Ontario, with the rising cost of living, there's definitely been an increased population in the homeless sector, especially in downtown cores, and St. Catharines is not exempt from that. Now, with that said, I would say the safety in St. Catharines is definitely a pro, as we can see here when we see that St. Catharines is one of the safer mid-sized cities in Ontario, and while crime does exist, it's been decreasing over the years. As according to Statistics Canada and the data provided based on the 2023 Crime Index, St. Catharines, which is in the Niagara region, had a crime severity index of 54.5, which is lower than the national average, and most areas are considered safe for families when thinking about living in St. Catharines. Now, for context, that score there is lower than the Greater Toronto Area, Hamilton, Calgary, Surrey, Ottawa, Kitchener, Waterloo, and Cambridge. However, slightly a bit higher than the Peel region as well as the Halton region. Now, like I mentioned in all my videos, if you truly want to learn more about the safety and the crime that happens in St. Catharines, what I recommend you go do is look at the local police force map and statistics. So you can find that link down below if you want additional research. Then another pro I know a lot of my clients, especially ones that have families, absolutely love about St. Catharines is the amazing schools. As in total, you're going to find 37 different elementary schools, and 31 of them rank above the provincial average, with some of the top performers in recent rankings being Oak Ridge Public Elementary School, Westdale Public Elementary School, as well as the St. James Catholic Elementary School. Then in terms of high schools within St. Catharines, you're going to find 9 total different high schools. And again, 7 of them are ranking above the provincial average, with the Eden Public High School rated the highest and was in the top 100 of high schools in all of Ontario. Then in terms of private schools, you're going to find a variety of different options also here in St. Catharines, from the Ridley College, which is one of Canada's most prestigious boarding schools, sitting on a 90-acre campus, from the Wheatley School that offers private, smaller classroom sizes, as well as the Aggregate Private School, and then 2 notable post-secondary schools that you'll notice in St. Catharines, and there will be a large student body in living in St. Catharines, is the Brock University, with more than 120 different programs to choose from. However, it's best known for its business and health science and environmental programs. But then you'll also find the Niagara College here, which has been in the top 10 of research colleges in Canada for the past 10 years. And in the last year, actually, it was rated number 1. Then another pro, a lot of my clients that are unsure where they're going to be relocating, but often land in St. Catharines, absolutely love this pro, and that is the cost of living. As when we are looking at the data from the Economic Research Institute, we can see that St. Catharines is about 6% above the national average, 1% above the provincial average. However, when you compare it to the cities that are closer to the GTA, it is generally more affordable. As if we look at the affordability breakdown, here you can see it's a little bit more affordable in transportation and healthcare. But of course, because it's in Ontario, it's going to be a little less affordable in the housing. However, like I mentioned, this is extremely relative. If you're comparing St. Catharines housing to Hamilton or Burlington or Oakville or Mississauga, you're going to look at St. Catharines as being relatively more affordable, which actually brings me on to the next pro of living in St. Catharines, and that is the real estate options and variety it has to offer you. As the median detached home sale price in St. Catharines, when compared to the cities that I was just mentioning, it's actually more affordable than Hamilton, Burlington, Grimsby, Lincoln, Brantford, and Niagara-on-the-Lake. It's a similar cost to Welland and Niagara Falls, and slightly a bit more expensive than Fort Erie. And if we zoom in to how the real estate has sold in the past 12 months, we can see it was primarily detached homes, as this made up 73% of the recent sales. The other 18% were townhomes, and then about 9% were condos that were selling. Now, where the majority of detached homes are selling in St. Catharines is it's typically between that $500,000 to $800,000. Now, if you compare this to Burlington or Oakville, where the majority are selling around $1 million, you could see how much more affordable St. Catharines is. Plus, your dollar's going to go a bit further. So the same home that's listed at $800,000 in St. Catharines and $800,000 in Burlington, for example, St. Catharines is going to be a larger and probably newer home. Then in terms of where the majority of townhomes were sold, this was selling usually between $400,000 and $600,000, with roughly about 50% of those being condo townhomes. And then in terms of condo apartments, the majority here were really selling between that $300,000 to $400,000 mark. So some of the more affordable condos you're going to be finding really in Southern Ontario. Now, of course, depending on what you're looking for your search criteria, we'd be happy to dive in more into your numbers, let you know what the recent market trends are. So send me and my team a message today to book a call, and we can break everything down and more for you and your family. But then another thing you need to know about before relocating to St. Catharines is the limited new development options. So like I mentioned, you're going to find some new development in St. Catharines. However, if you're comparing it to Niagara Falls or Welland for that matter, or even Hamilton, there's just going to be less new development here. However, with that said, you're going to find a lot of established neighborhoods that maybe have houses that have been renovated and have been updated completely. However, you get bigger lot size when comparing it to the newer housing. Then another thing I always like to mention to my clients, and I kind of already briefly touched on it here, is what you're looking for in your neighborhood. As of course, if you're in the downtown section of St. Catharines, that's going to be a little bit different than if you're in the rural suburban section versus if you're in the suburban section close to the universities. And that actually brings me on to the next pro or con, depending on what you're looking for. If you're looking for an investment opportunity, some great opportunities by the campuses to invest in and rent out. But of course, some families want a bit quieter of a lifestyle, and there's just different neighborhoods that I'd recommend to you versus an investor looking to rent to students. So something to keep in mind when poking around is where and the proximity to the different universities and how that student body affects the seasonality, both in terms of the traffic, but also just the upkeep of the area. Then another con associated with living in St. Catharines is the high property taxes. As out of the 24 cities that compare different property taxes, Niagara region, which of course St. Catharines is a part of, was the 4th highest, meaning it's a higher property tax than Hamilton, all the Halton cities, Toronto. However, a little bit less than London. So it depends, of course, on where you're coming from and what you're comparing it to. As in 2024, the property tax was sitting at around 1.55%. Then another thing you can't escape when living in St. Catharines is the car dependency and traffic bottlenecks. Now, most residents that live in St. Catharines are going to use a car to get around. Now, of course, again, it's quite relative. If you're coming from another city in Niagara, St. Catharines really isn't going to have much different of options to choose from, right? You're mainly car dependent. You're not going to have really that much traffic within the city. I mean, you'll have some. However, a good amount of it will be just on the QE getting back to St. Catharines if you're commuting from somewhere in Toronto. And then usually around the highway accesses is where the other bottlenecks are. Other than that, and then maybe I guess a little bit in the downtown core in terms of map bottlenecks. However, with that said, the traffic moves pretty well. It's just you're going to be pretty car dependent when living in St. Catharines. Which actually brings me on to the next pro or con, again, depending on what you compare it to, and that is the public transit that St. Catharines has to offer you. Now, because it is the largest city in the Niagara region, it's going to have better public transit than the rest of the regions. However, with that said, it's not like Toronto, and that's why I mentioned it's going to be car dependent. As right now, you're going to have the Niagara Region Transit, which has a decent bus map that comes about every 30 minutes. And then if you want to get around to the other cities, you're going to find a few different GO bus options, as well as the St. Catharines GO, which is a GO train station that offers a couple of trains each day taking you to Union Station. However, it's about a 2-hour-ish train ride in, and right now there's limited availability in terms of the amount of trains that come. However, there are plans to expand the train service, allowing more trains taking you into the rest of the Greater Toronto area. Then another pro or con, but something you need to be aware of before living in St. Catharines, is the healthcare, as you do have a slightly newer facility at the Niagara Health, which was built back in 2013 and is the main hospital for the St. Catharines region. And then you have a bunch of smaller clinics throughout, so it basically covers 99% or 90% of people's needs with this hospital here. However, if you have more specialized needs, you're just a short drive away from Hamilton that has some world-class healthcare you can capitalize on as well. Then talking about traveling outside of the city kind of brings me on to the next con of living in St. Catharines, and that is the limited employment opportunities. Now again, this is very relative as it is the largest city in Niagara, so there are going to be more job opportunities than pretty much every other city in Niagara's region. However, with that said, if you compare the job opportunities to Hamilton or Toronto, it is going to be lacking a little bit, and that's why a lot of residents usually commute or work hybrid or work from home from somewhere else in the GTA. However, with that said, the three main employment sectors in St. Catharines is the healthcare, education, as well as manufacturing. Then the next pro that I've basically teased and let you guys know about living in St. Catharines is the amazing wineries and vineyards you have at your doorstep, as Niagara region is world renowned for its amazing local wines, and within just a short 30-minute drive away, you have more than 50 different wineries to take a look at. Some of my local favorites around St. Catharines would be the Rockway Wineries, 13th Street Wineries, as well as Herder Estate Wineries. And while I'm not personally the biggest wine guy, I enjoy a glass here or there, what I am more a fan of in the Niagara region is the amazing golfing it has to offer you. As here, you're going to find the St. Catharines Golf and Country Club, Rockway Vineyards Golf Club, then Royal Niagara Golf Club, Broad Golf Club, as well as the Westport Driving Range, a perfect spot to hit a bucket of balls. However, now that you've learned the 20 pros and cons of what it's like living in St. Catharines, is it the right city for you and your family? Comment down below. Otherwise, let's jump on the map and I can share with you some of the key deal breakers in different locations in St. Catharines that stop my clients from moving it. So let's jump on the computer and I'll break those down for you. Alrighty, so as you see, we have St. Catharines on the map here. And as you can see, I have mapped out a few different areas. So we'll first talk about where the industrial areas are. And as you can see, there's two main areas really in St. Catharines that you're gonna find the most, and it's just light industrial or like a GM plant. And it's really going to be on the east side, kind of along this river right here. And these are the two main sections to be aware of. Then the other thing you might want to be aware of is the wastewater treatment plants. And you're going to find three of them. So the first one is just over here, which is right beside the Lakeside Park. It's something I mentioned at the beginning. This is where you're going to find the biggest wastewater treatment plant in all of St. Catharines, the Port Dalhousie Wastewater Treatment Plant. But then you're also going to find another one just over here at Sunset Beach at the Port Weller Wastewater Treatment Plant. And then the final one is Ducey Falls. It's kind of tucked away and way less. It's actually just on the other side of this lake that's right beside Block University. So you're never really going to notice it compared to the other two. However, something you should be noted when thinking about relocating to St. Catharines. Then another one that my clients always want to know about is where the landfills and recycling centers are. So we really have one recycling center or landfill. It's right here on the east side, kind of right across from Thorold is actually where it's located, just on the southern end of St. Catharines to be aware of. Then in terms of where you're going to find the hydro lines, I'm actually going to flip the base map over to this one here so we can see it a bit better. Here are the main hydro lines, right? So it's coming in from Niagara Falls and it goes straight along this industrial sector here and then basically straight across St. Catharines. And then it does rise up here as well as just across here. These are the main hydro corridor. So if you don't want to live near one of those massive hydro towers, try to avoid the areas that are around these blue lines here. Then you will find a few power generations. More in particular, the one that's the most notable is just down here right beside Ducey Falls. That's one of the other hydro stations that they use to generate power. Then the last one I'll quickly mention is the train tracks. Now this is connected to the St. Catharines GO train station that we talked about a little bit ago. And for the most part, that's what it's used for. It's some CN rails as well, but for the most part, it's just this GO train line here that's kind of cutting through the middle or southern end of St. Catharines as well before jetting out to Niagara Falls. So now I hope you have a better idea of the different pros and cons and where the deal breakers are on St. Catharines map so you can make the best choice. Now, if you want to learn more about what it's like living in another city just in the Niagara region, the next video I'd recommend you go take a look at is my complete video breaking down the different pros and cons of living in Grimsby, which is just a little bit closer to Hamilton. So you can find that video right here. Otherwise, I hope you have a great day.